Gen 4 was probably the most significant turning point for the Pokemon franchise, with mechanical changes that laid the foundation for what modern Pokemon would look like. And in this mechanical shift, many Pokemon benefited and many suffered. Gen 4 introduced the new physical special split system, which meant that every single type in the game had both physical and special attacks available to it now. New competitive mainstay items like the Choice Scarf and the Life Orb were introduced. A huge amount of new metagame-defining attacks and support moves and utility moves were introduced to the game that completely changed everything. So in this massive jump from Gen 3 to 4, who were the biggest winners and the biggest losers? I'm going to make a list here of the top 3 winners and losers. And these will be Pokemon that were present in Gen 3 that either loved the transition from Gen 3 to 4 or absolutely hated it. Let's get into it, why don't we? And let's start with the losers. Let's start with the bad news. And I won't get into the top 3 losers just yet. Why don't we start with some runner-up losers? Jolteon is one of my favorite Pokemon, my favorite of the evolutions, and unfortunately, it did not have a fantastic time from the transition to Gen 4. In Generation 3, Jolteon was a very solid Pokemon, and a foundational part of the metagame. Jolteon's incredible speed tier of base 130 speed allowed it to achieve miracles. Remember, the Choice Scarf didn't exist at this time, so a speed tier this high was very valuable, and Jolteon was sort of like the original Choice Scarfer. It was able to outrun important Pokemon after they boosted, like Tyranitar after it used Dragon Dance. Jolteon is faster than Tyranitar after Dragon Dancing. Jolteon is also faster than Swampert after it consumes a Salac Berry. And in general, Jolteon is going to be the fastest thing around, outrunning very important targets like Starmie, Gengar, Zapdos, Salamence, Flygon, etc. In the world of Gen 3, Jolteon didn't need much to pose a threat. Simply having Thunderbolt and a complementary hidden power type was good enough. Jolteon also had access to Baton Pass, which was used as a pivoting move here. This is before U-turn existed. I mean, the pivoting effect is fantastic to keep momentum up and even get favorable switches when baiting in special walls like Blissey. You could Baton Pass to Dugtrio and trap them, or just bring in a physical threat to keep the pressure up. Jolteon had great utility like Wish and Roar and Thunderwave. The teams appreciated. So how did this great Pokemon fall so far in Gen 4? Well, a lot happened here. I think that the biggest thing that made Jolteon feel a bit redundant was the introduction of the Choice Scarf. Choice Scarf is a very, very significant new item introduced in Gen 4 that increases your Pokemon's speed by 1.5x with the drawback of having to lock into a move. This allowed many more Pokemon to achieve speed benchmarks they previously couldn't. And so Jolteon's speed tier, reaching 394 speed with a maximum EV investment and plus nature, was just not impressive anymore, as Pokemon with much lower base speeds could simply equip a Choice Scarf and easily outdo that speed tier. With the Choice Scarf in the ecosystem, Jolteon is less sure about whether it's outrunning things and just not as valued. Now, it is still useful to be fast from base stats alone, because you don't need a Choice Scarf as much, and you have the privilege of switching moves and such. But Jolteon itself is feeling a bit weak in the higher power level environment of Gen 4. Jolteon's old adversary Tyranitar was buffed in Gen 4, and Tyranitar now receives a special defense boost in the sand that it creates, so Jolteon doesn't hit that as hard. Jolteon is also vulnerable to being pursuit trapped by Tyranitar, who now has a physical pursuit which hits much harder than the special pursuit of Gen 3. The Baton Pass pivoting option is also less valuable here. Baton Pass can still be used for the pivoting effect alone. It's illegal with stat passing, but you can use it to pivot. But in this environment, there are now pivoting attacks that have been introduced, Volt Switch and U-turn. At this point, Jolteon doesn't have Volt Switch in its moveset, and it doesn't have U-turn either. But other electric types do. The new Rotom has access to Volt Switch, and is generally a far better Pokemon in the format. Zapdos has Volt Switch and U-turn. Jolteon's utility and firepower are feeling worse, and its coverage is also feeling worse. Its best special attacking coverage is Shadow Ball and Signal Beam. Hidden Power still an option as well. But these are weak moves that aren't stab boosted and just don't do enough damage in this environment. I also want to really emphasize how much the introduction of Rotom destroyed Jolteon's career. Rotom with a Choice Scarf just feels like a better version of Jolteon. It has stab on its Shadow Ball. It is a spin blocker thanks to electric ghost typing. It has the ability levitate, which is just so good and grants a complete ground immunity. It has Will-O-Wisp, which is a really important status move. It has Choice Scarf trick combo. It's just a way better Pokemon in every way, and it is the go-to electric type of Gen 4. Jolteon feels pretty bad by comparison. Jolteon is OU by technicality, but it is not commonly used in the format. It has some merit with its Volt Absorb and its Speed Tier and stuff, but it's certainly fallen from grace here. I think that there are worse losers in the Gen 4 metagame though, of course. Jolteon doesn't have it completely terrible compared to some of these other ones. Claydol is another runner-up loser that I think is worth mentioning here. Claydol is fantastic in Gen 3 OU, where it is the most popular rapid spinner. Claydol is excellent with its ground typing, making it sand immune and giving it fantastic defensive merit. It has levitation. With levitate, it is immune to ground and can crucially dodge spikes, which is beautiful on a rapid spinner. And the ground typing also offers Sandstorm immunity, which is very relevant. Claydol feels very sturdy in the Gen 3 metagame, with defensive stats that do the trick alongside all the other great defensive traits you have. And Claydol has the great combination of Rapid Spin and Explosion. It can crucially get rid of spikes from the field with Rapid Spin, and Explosion allows it to trade with enemies and output a bit of offensive pressure, so it's not too passive either. Explosion is a very high power attack that sacrifices yourself for massive damage. This means Claydol is not just a rapid spinner, it is threatening to trade with key targets, and it is a frightening foe indeed as a result. Stab Earthquake and Stab Psychic are also great, Psychic allowing it to apply pressure to Gengar, the most popular ghost type and spin blocker. So Claydol has so much going for it in Gen 3, it's one of the most popular Pokemon in the format, one of the best. And in Gen 4, Claydol has regrettably fallen down to the UU tier, it is no longer ranked in OU. Claydol is also suffering from the presence of Rotom. Rotom was a big moment for Gen 4, as you can see. Claydol really benefited from its high special defense stats and great matchup into electric types, but when the top electric type of the format is now an electric ghost type with stab, special attacking Shadow Ball, that's not as true, is it? The primary spin blocker of the format is also no longer Gengar, it is Rotom, who can Will-O-Wisp you and easily 1v1 you. Claydol is terrible against Rotom, and Rotom is not only the kind of Pokemon Claydol was trying to defensively answer in Gen 3, which it cannot do to Rotom. Rotom is also the primary spin blocker, and Claydol can't touch it in that respect either. So Claydol, as a rapid spinner and a answer to electric types, is just way worse when Rotom is both of those things and it destroys Claydol. Defensively, Claydol has some competition from new Pokemon like Bronzong. Bronzong is also a Stealth Rock setter with Levitate, but it has the superior Steel Psychic typing and is just more threatening, checks more things, has the crucial Dragon resistance, which is more important now. Claydol is generally more vulnerable to neutral attacks, and also the rise of higher power Grass type attacks. Remember in Gen 3, Hidden Power was the coverage move of choice for most Pokemon, which is a low power 70 base attack. Now you have moves like Energy Ball and Grass Knot and Leaf Storm, which do way more damage to Claydol. Claydol certainly doesn't like the physical special split in the sense that now Ice and Grass and Water type moves can be physical, and enemy threats like Gyarados and Breloom now actually pose a threat to it. In Gen 3, Claydol was pretty good against enemies like Gyarados and Breloom, since they don't have physical stab on the types that matter against Claydol, the super effective types. But now Breloom has a big Seed Bomb against Claydol, and Gyarados has a big Waterfall against Claydol, and that's no good. So Claydol just doesn't function as well as it does in the Gen 3 environment. The physical special split really changed Claydol's defensive profile. Now it's just vulnerable to more things. There are special ghost type moves now. That's a disaster. There are physical water and grass moves. And Claydol is also filled with spite and hatred and rage towards those that created him. Claydol was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, in a very privileged position when he came into the world in Gen 3 as one of the top Pokemon in competitive. And that was all snatched away in an instant when Gen 4 released, and Claydol's very bitter about this. Claydol has not taken it well, and to this day is quite furious, especially at Gyarados and Breloom, who used to be easy matchups and are now very much outdoing Claydol. Perhaps the fall of Claydol is not poor luck, but karmic justice. Claydol has a terrible attitude, had an egotistical streak about him in the Gen 3 metagame where he thought that he would never die. Claydol thought that he was invincible and would remain on top forever, and when you have an attitude like that, the world has a way of bringing you back down to earth, I think. Claydol could learn a thing or two from a more humble Pokemon like Azumarill, who patiently waited for buffs to come later in the series, and so they did, and Azumarill maintained a positive outlook on life throughout the years, and that paid dividends later. And now Azumarill is far superior to Claydol. Really makes you think, doesn't it? Really makes you ponder what truly matters in life. And the final runner-up loser here I want to speak about is Moltres. In Gen 3, Moltres was a fantastic Pokemon. This is when Fire Flying was a really good dual-type combo. You're immune to Spikes, which is crucial. You're immune to Ground and Dugtrio's Arena Trap effect as well, which are very, very valuable traits. Fire offers a immunity to Will-O-Wisp, which is a rare trait and a good one. And you even have nice resistances to Grass and Steel. And the Steel resistance allows you to switch in on Metagross. Moltres has a good typing here, and as a fire type, it is a formidable special attacker indeed, with its Stab, Flamethrower, and even Overheat if it wants to hit harder. Off the back of a base 125 special attack are very powerful indeed. Moltres even has Will-O-Wisp to punish certain switch-ins. It's a rare special attacker that wants Snorlax to switch in because it will ruin Snorlax's life with a mere Will-O-Wisp. And Roar is effectively used on Pokemon like this to force Spike's chip damage on defensive switches, like against Blissey. And Roar has better uses elsewhere to defeat Sleeping Suicunes and Sleeping Snorlaxes and prevent you from getting defeated by an endgame boost sweeper. Moltres is a great Pokemon in Gen 3 OU. It's one of my favorites to use. But Moltres in Gen 4 suffered from probably the most significant new move addition in the game, and that was Stealth Rock. Stealth Rock was a new entry hazard introduced in Gen 4 that deals damage to the enemy as they switch in based on their weakness to the rock type. Moltres has a ×4 weakness to the rock type and therefore takes an unbelievable 50% of its HP bar upon simply switching onto the field. What was once a great defensive type combination that allowed you to actually sidestep hazards and give great defensive entry points is now one of the worst defensive type combinations you can get because of that ×4 rock weakness, making it so difficult to switch onto the field. Stealth Rock is one of the most commonly used new moves in Gen 4 and remains so to this day, and as a result, Pokemon weak to rock have a real uphill battle. Moltres is familiar with that more than anyone, I fear. So that was a death sentence for Moltres' OU ranking, but amazingly I think that we can give a shout out to Moltres for having respectable resilience. It can still be used occasionally in Gen 4 OU for its access to Roost and Pressure and its good defensive traits when it is built around, when you have a sturdy Rapid Spinner. There are teams that use Moltres in Gen 4 OU, amazingly. It's niche, and it's not the Titan it once was, but it can still be used. I think that's quite a statement about Moltres and its resilience as a person. And it is ranked in the UU tier, which is not that much of a fall when you think about it, considering the ×4 rock weakness. A UU ranking is respectable, and Moltres has fundamental qualities that remain solid even still, but it is of course a Pokemon that did dislike the transition from Gen 3 to 4 more than most. Now how about we get to the real top 3 losers of the transition from Gen 3 to 4. I think that Medicham has to make this list. Medicham in Gen 3 is a great Pokemon. For much of Medicham's life, it was ranked in the UUBL tier very respectably, and recently Medicham actually rose to OU status with its increasing competitive viability and positive performance. Medicham is a great fighting type wall breaker in this format, with its ability Pure Power granting a doubled attack stat, allowing it to achieve very impressive damage output indeed. Medicham is a great aggressive lead Pokemon that is difficult to switch in against and forces out Tyranitar very well. Medicham has access to Shadow Ball for physical ghost coverage, which is a physical move in Gen 3, and that is a great option, as fighting and ghost are very complementary types. Medicham is an incredibly hard-hitting Focus Punch, nice coverage in the form of Rock Slide, and it has more moveset variety than you would think. Choice Band is an option to maximize your immediate damage output. Various berries can be used on Medicham, like the Lum Berry and the Slackberry and Lychee Berry, all with their own benefits. And fringe sets involving Bulk Up and Recover have also been seen to some success. Medicham sets itself apart from other fighting types of Gen 3 with its sheer breaking power and that nice Shadow Ball coverage option which they lack. So what happened in the transition from Gen 3 to 4? Well, I think that Medicham was not a huge fan of the new physical special split. Now don't get me wrong, Medicham did benefit in some ways from this new change, with new options in its moveset like Zen Headbutt for Psychic Stab, which it previously lacked, and the Elemental Punches, providing some nice physical coverage, Thunder Punch and Ice Punch. But that crucial Ghost coverage option of Shadow Ball is now a special attack, and Medicham can't use that anymore, and that was one of its greatest benefits. So that is kind of bad news for Medicham, isn't it? In the Gen 4 OU environment, Medicham also just feels a little bit slow and frail. It is very weak defensively, and it has only a base 80 speed, which is made worse by the fact that the power level is increasing, things are faster and bulkier, things have Choice Scarf now to achieve higher speeds than they previously could. In Gen 3, it felt like when Medicham was in, it could threaten the whole format. Now that is not so true. There are type berries and bulkier Pokemon and, Rotom, who is a great switch in. Medicham is just not quite as threatening to everything as it once was, with everything around it getting more powerful. Medicham also feels less worthwhile compared to other fighting types. The new Infernape has access to Stab Close Combat, which is a very powerful new fighting type attack. And Infernape is faster, it has Stealth Rock and Taunt for some utility, it has mixed attacking options. Medicham is slow and just has less options than a Pokemon like Infernape, who has a much vaster move pool. Even though Medicham can achieve a higher attack stat than Infernape, it's just not as worth Infernape's advantages. Infernape's advantages are superior. There is also the new Lucario, who is faster, has the Stab Close Combat, has priority moves that allow it to sweep better, has Swords Dance that allow it to sweep better, and its Steel typing also makes it immune to Sandstorm, giving it some sturdiness, and crucial traits like resistances and immunity to poison. Medicham, with its fighting psychic typing, feels outdated, it feels old-fashioned. It is getting eaten alive by Sandstorm and Chip Damage and Spikes and Stealth Rock. Its best stab option is High Jump Kick, which only has 100 power in this generation and is much worse than the new Close Combat, which Pokemon other than it have received. Tragically, Medicham just feels limited, not as threatening as it was, it's weaker and its frailty is catching up to it in the higher power level, and competition is outdoing it. Medicham fell drastically in Gen 3 from OU ranked and respectable in the format to now NU ranked, which is one of the lowest tiers in the game. It's a significant drop off and Medicham is really hurting. Medicham had a good attitude about this though. He understands that suffering is a part of life. And while some egotistical and psychotic Pokemon, frankly, could not handle the stark drop-off in their viability from Gen 3 to 4, Medicham took it in stride, and rather than mourning the loss of his OU status, he came to appreciate that he was ever OU at all, even for a fleeting moment. And as we know later in the series, Mega Medicham would release, skyrocketing Medicham back into the forefront. And this is why Medicham is one of the most revered Pokemon, philosophically speaking. Regice is a big loser. Sorry, Regice. I'm sorry, that was rude. In Gen 3, Regice is a good Pokemon. Many people forget. This is considered one of the worst legendaries ever, but in Gen 3 that was not the case. Regice, in fact, was OU ranked for a long time. Regice may be a mono ice type, but it has impeccable stats, especially its fantastic base 200 special defense. And a mono ice typing in Gen 3 was not that debilitating. These stats made up for it, and Regice could function here. Remember, this is a world before the physical special split, where there was no such thing as a fighting type special attack or a steel type special attack. So Regice was only really worried about the fire type special attacks that were super effective. Otherwise, it was pretty damn effective as a special wall against, well, most special attackers in the game, like Starmie, Zapdos, Gengar, Celebi, Jolteon, you name it. Regice is probably going to wall it and threaten it with a big Stab Ice Beam. This is a benefit to being an ice type that gives Regice a bit more offensive oomph than something like Blissey, who is a bit more passive. Regice has a pretty damn hard-hitting Stab Ice Beam and the complementary Thunderbolt as well. Plus, Regice has Explosion to trade with enemies and threaten Blissey and Snorlax with a potential crucial trade. Regice sets itself apart from the Blissey and Snorlax special walls of Gen 3 with its special attacking firepower that they lack, and it is a valid being. It is valid and it exists, and it is very much appreciated by the community. In Gen 4, though, everything changed and Regice plummeted all the way down to the NU tier. There is, of course, one clear reason why this happened, and that was the introduction of Stealth Rock. Regice was already suffering a bit from its vulnerability to chip damage. It did not love Sandstorm Chip or Spikes. It does not have Levitation or anything like that. So Stealth Rock was a real nail in the coffin that cut a significant 25% of Regice's health bar as it switches in, making it so much worse at switching in defensively against those special threats it's trying to wall. So that was terrible, and of course we know that Gen 4 introduced so many more moves in the game with higher base powers, and this was a disaster for Regice. We have fire-type physical attacks now, we have close combat and focus blast and aura sphere, and all of these attacks that Regice previously wasn't worried about. With less options in Gen 3 for attacks, Regice felt like it could switch in on things and actually take hits very well. This is no longer the case. It's got Stealth Rock to contend with, and it's just worse at taking hits now. Attacks are more powerful. Regice is left behind. Regice's offensive role is also feeling worse. It was a special wall that had a lot of attacks on it. Now that is just not as good. You want utility, you want value, you want to do something. Regice just clicks moves and things can switch in on Regice very easily. So even as a threat, it doesn't feel as good in Gen 4. Regice had a very short-lived moment of competitive triumph, and it quickly plummeted to its more infamous identity as one of the worst legendaries of all time. And it's unfortunately true. Its success was fleeting, and to this day it remains dreadful. It's absolutely one of the biggest losers of Gen 3 to 4. How did Regice feel about this? Well, he's a bit of a blockhead, isn't he? He's a bit of a block of ice. Regice doesn't even know what a Smogon tier is, and when I asked him what he thought about his previous OU ranking, he said, "What does that even mean? What is that? I just click Ice Beam and Explosion, I don't know." Regice, all he does is complain to me about Grumpig and how he has thick fat and can resist Ice Beam, and how that's garbage. He thinks that's overpowered. I don't think he realizes that Ruby and Sapphire is no longer the current gen, because back then he was facing off against Grumpig in OU. Now he's facing off against Grumpig in Gen 4 NU, and he thinks it's the same tier. I don't think he's all there, Regice said. A being made of ice tends to not be the brightest, but maybe that's for the best. A little bit of blissful ignorance there from Reginald Ice is a blessing in disguise, you could say. But the biggest loser from Gen 3 to 4 has got to be Charizard. In Gen 3 OU, Charizard is a great Pokemon. Very similar to Moltres, but Charizard sets itself apart with the great option of Focus Punch, which allows it to threaten significant Pokemon like Tyranitar, Blissey, and Snorlax. Charizard has all the benefits of Moltres typing-wise, but is a bit faster and is more potent as a mixed attacker. There is also the option of Beat Up, which allows Charizard to threaten Blissey, due to the unique way Beat Up works in Gen 3. When Gen 4 came around, Charizard had the worst day of its entire life. Everything fell apart, everything went away like dust in the wind. Of course, Stealth Rock ruined Charizard's career more than anything else, in the same way it affected Moltres. Charizard's mere existence is called into question when the little rocks force it to take half of its life force every single time it has the audacity to walk into the building. How dare you, Charizard? How dare you try to exist? You could never do it. But Moltres hung on respectably well despite the Stealth Rock weakness, due to fundamental qualities that allowed Moltres to persevere. Charizard did not have as much luck. Charizard's success in Gen 3 was largely due to metagame circumstances. You know, the Focus Punch is relevant against common enemies that Charizard is facing frequently, like Blissey, who is pretty ubiquitous in Gen 3 and very common. If not Blissey, then Snorlax is also common. Gen 4 is a less centralized metagame with more things viable, and Charizard is less able to target specific enemies when this is the case. While Moltres can still sort of function with its superior defensive stats and ability to wall things nicely, when it has the appropriate rapid spin support, Charizard is frail. Charizard really relied on the offensive output it had and the mixed coverage that allowed it to threaten more things, but now, without it specifically targeting the most popular cores of Gen 3, and with Gen 4 having a vaster metagame where that's not as possible, Charizard just feels like bad Moltres now, and bad Moltres is not a good thing to be. I think Charizard had the starkest drop-off here, from genuine OU menace to now big nothing, all the way down in the NU tier, where it is left to rot. So these are the three biggest losers from Gen 3 to 4, Medicham, Regice, and Charizard. Once on top, immediately plummeting to nothingness in the very next game. And these three became great friends during this experience, thanks to their shared despair. Now we can move on to the good news, the winners of Gen 3 to 4's transition. And we're going to start with one that you might be surprised to see is actually a runner-up, rather than a member of my top 3 winners list. And that is Jirachi. Jirachi is the most infamous Pokemon of Gen 4. In this transition, Jirachi benefited so significantly, with the most noticeable new addition being its access to the new move Iron Head. Iron Head is a new move in Gen 4, a steel-type physical attack with 80 power, and a 30% chance to flinch, a 30% chance to make it so the target cannot act at all on their turn. And Jirachi has the ability Serene Grace, doubling this flinch chance from 30 to 60%. This strong stab move with a 60% chance to prevent the enemy from acting is just ridiculously powerful and defines the metagame probably more than any other single attack in Gen 4 OU, I would say. Iron Head Jirachi is absolutely central to the format, and 60% is so high to prevent the enemy from acting on an already strong move, but then when you factor in that Jirachi has Body Slam as well and Thunder Wave to paralyze the enemy, further enhancing the chances of inaction from the enemy, it is just truly, truly outrageous how fantastic this is. So this was an enormous buff. Jirachi also benefited from the rise of dragon types, as its dragon resistance feels more valuable than ever. Wasn't that relevant in Gen 3, now it's incredibly relevant to resist moves like Outrage and Draco Meteor. And Jirachi's excellent traits, like its malleable 100 in every base stat, allowing it to fill whatever role you want, also boded well for Jirachi. It is a great benefactor of the new Choice Scarf item, allowing it to act as a bit of speed control. And Iron Head is not the only new great option Jirachi received in this generation. There was also Stealth Rock, which is the big new hazard. Jirachi is a great Stealth Rock setter. Jirachi also has U-Turn for pivoting. Now it's not even that passive. It can keep momentum up in that sense as well. And Grass Knot is a great and very much appreciated new special attacking option too. Jirachi just benefited so much from the transition from Gen 3 to 4. And it is arguably the best Pokemon in Gen 4 OU. So why wouldn't it be in the top 3 winners? Well, while these new buffs and benefits from the new mechanics are considerable, let's not forget that back in Gen 3, Jirachi was also one of the strongest Pokemon in the game. Gen 3 Jirachi is an absolutely outstanding Pokemon with near unmatched versatility, sand immunity, wish passing, paralysis, calm mind sets, even the fringe physical sets and mixed sets. Jirachi is, in some people's eyes, a top 3 Pokemon in the metagame, top 5. Opinions on Jirachi do vary, some rated higher than others, but there's no doubt that Jirachi is one of the strongest Pokemon in Gen 3 OU still, so it is a nice jump from one of the strongest to the strongest. That is a jump, but I think that there are more improved Pokemon from the transition. Pokemon that had a more significant leap in their viability, you could say. Plus, Jirachi is an immoral Pokemon, and I do factor in morality at least a little bit in this list, so we must consider that as well. Jirachi has no morals whatsoever. Breloom is absolutely worth mentioning here as a runner-up winner. Breloom in Gen 3 was a solid Pokemon. It is ranked OU, but it is a lower-end OU Pokemon in many people's eyes. It is not particularly common in high-level play compared to the more prevalent Metagross, Salamence, Tyranitar, etc. Breloom has access to Spore, which is great to directly put something to sleep with 100% accuracy. It has Focus Punch as a nice follow-up to that, which you can use immediately. It has the nice priority of Mach Punch, and can get a lot of mileage out of its 130 attack. It's a fighting type breaker that can also put something to bed and carry that momentum very well on certain types of teams, usually very aggressive teams. But its attacking options feel pretty limited, and Breloom does suffer from its frailty and its lower speed. In Gen 4, however, Breloom got some really significant buffs that pushed it from a decent OU Pokemon on some teams to perhaps the best physical attacker in Gen 4 OU. You could certainly make such an argument. Breloom received the new option of Seed Bomb, which is a grass-type physical attack, and that previously didn't exist. And this is massive. This simple new change gives Breloom so much more potential to threaten enemies, makes it so much scarier. It hits so many more targets that it previously could not, with a stab grass-type attack. Breloom also received the new option of Superpower, a 120 power fighting type attack, with the drawback of lowering your attack and defense by 1. The massive power of this move more than makes up for the minus stat drawback, and it just makes Breloom immediately threatening with an incredibly powerful fighting type attack. And on top of all of that, Breloom received the new ability Poison Heal, which is an absolutely fantastic ability. Breloom will now heal 1/8 of its max HP every single turn when poisoned instead of taking damage, and by self-inflicting poison with a toxic orb, Breloom has a form of healing that outpaces Sandstorm damage. In Gen 3, Breloom is just carrying leftovers usually, and Sandstorm damage will cancel that out. Now Breloom can chip heal in the sand, which is massive, and Breloom is also effectively immune to all status since it is poisoned already, self-inflicted. That means burn and paralysis and even sleep are not a problem anymore. And that status immunity makes Breloom so much better defensively, allows it to switch in on so many more things and contend with Pokemon that rely on status to answer offensive threats. Breloom already had OU status thanks to its high attack and Spore, but now it is just so much more effective. Its frailty is less of a problem, it has better breaking power, it has more options, and it has the benefit of chip heal in the sand as well as effective status immunity. Breloom skyrocketed in viability from Gen 3 to 4. It's one of the strongest Pokemon in Gen 4. But at the end of the day, this is still a Pokemon that was OU ranked in the previous gen, we must remember. It's still good in the previous gen. I think that there are Pokemon that benefited more from the transition. Plus, Breloom is sort of morally grey. Sometimes he's a good guy, sometimes he puts people to bed with powdery mushroom spores, which is not very moral, not very acceptable in society. So there's that to factor in as well. And then another runner-up winner, Dragonite. Dragonite in Gen 3 was not that fantastic, and was very much outclassed by the superior Salamence. It was difficult to justify running Dragonite over Salamence in Gen 3 with its lower speed and inferior ability Inner Focus, which is not as useful as Intimidate. Dragonite had limited merit in competitive with its niche options of Heal Bell and Focus Punch and Thunderbolt, giving it occasional use, but overall in Gen 3, Dragonite is not that fantastic. In Gen 4, though, Dragonite absolutely shot up to the moon, with so many new fantastic things to take. Dragonite is one of the chief benefactors of the physical special split, since it is a physical attacker, and it had always wanted a physical dragon-type attack to use. Now it has such a thing. The new Outrage, newly buffed Outrage, has 120 power, turning it into one of the strongest new attacks in Gen 4. Dragonite is outstanding at clicking Outrage. Dragonite also has great physical coverage now with Fire Punch, Ice Punch, and even mixed attacking sets are good. The new Draco Meteor is a great new option for Dragonite if it wants to go in that direction. Dragonite benefits from new items. The Yachi Berry is a great new one, which shields Dragonite from an incoming Ice-type attack once, halving its damage. The Yachi Berry makes Dragonite much more effective as a physical Dragon Dance sweeper. Dragonite also likes the Life Orb on Agility mixed attacking set, allowing it to just do more damage with all of its attacks, and to get a bit more out of its high-powered Draco Meteors. Dragonite went from a fringe alternative to Salamence in Gen 3 that wasn't very good to now one of the strongest threats in OU. And that is a significant jump indeed. It sounds as if maybe this guy should deserve to make the top 3, but you will find soon enough that there are 3 great winners that outdo even these runner-ups. There are 3 big winners in Gen 4 that I will now illuminate to you. I will now reveal to you. Winner number 3 in the Gen 4 transition, I would have to give it to Scizor. Scizor in Generation 3 was not a very good Pokemon at all. Scizor suffered from an incredibly shallow move pool with barely any good attacking options, relying on such weak attacks like Silver Wind with its measly 60 power, and physical hidden power types as well, for Hidden Power Ghost and other such coverage. The best Scizor could really do in Gen 3 was act as a speed pass engine with agility button pass, but now that's illegal, and it wasn't very good anyway at doing that. It can also use a reversal endure set and be a bit of a sweeper there, but that's such a telegraphed set, and it's not very reliable at all. Scizor is UUBL ranked. It has been used in competitive, but I do feel that it is quite terrible in Gen 3. And there's not much high-level replays of it being used and succeeding. There's way more of people trying to make it work and just failing miserably because it is so limited in what it can actually do in Gen 3. But in Gen 4, that completely changed. Scizor went from having almost no attacking option to having some of the greatest attacking options in the format. The most notable change for Scizor was its new ability Technician, meaning that 60 power or less moves have a power boost of 1.5x. And Scizor's most famous new attack was of course Bullet Punch, a steel-type physical attack with priority on it. It has 40 power and it benefits from that Technician boost, enhancing its power by 1.5x. This great new stab priority move, stronger than most other priority moves in the game, was a huge buff for Scizor, but there was more, of course. Scizor received super power for fantastic fighting coverage. That was very much relevant when just last gen Scizor had no good coverage. Now it has this great high power move. Bug Bite is a good new option because it has 60 power and therefore benefits from the Technician boost. Now you actually have a good bug stab option that you can use. Scizor gets Roost in Gen 4, allowing it to heal, and there are now bulky Swords Dance Roost sets you can use for a more defensive win condition, and that's fantastic. U-Turn is a new move in Gen 4, a bug-type physical move that is one of the most impactful on the metagame. U-Turn is a 70 power bug move that switches you out after dealing damage. This ability to deal considerable physical stab damage and then pivot out is just such a great momentum play, and it's part of the reason Scizor is so excellent. Scizor also received the option of Pursuit, which is now a physical attack. Scizor did have this before, but it didn't use it, of course, because it was a special attack in Gen 3. Now it's a physical attack, and not only is it a form of dark coverage that is buffed by Technician when the power boost is not in effect, but also it allows you to trap enemies and, as they're switching out, deal double damage to them, and if they are weak to dark, they might just perish from such a thing. Scizor's move pool went from shallow to diverse in just one gen. It got one of the best offensive abilities in the game, and so many new options that turned it from a terrible Pokemon barely clinging to the UUBL ranking to now a genuine force in the OU format. It's one of the biggest glow-ups from gen to gen in the game for certain. But there are two more that I think are more significant even than this. I mentioned how great the transition was for Dragonite just a moment ago, and how in Gen 3 it was just a worse Salamence. Well, in Gen 4, Dragonite is still just a worse Salamence, but the value of such a thing has changed. Because Salamence was so powerful in the transition from Gen 3 to 4 that it had to be banned outright from the format, which in Gen 4 is significant because this didn't really happen very often to non-legendaries. Salamence was a rare case where a regular old Pokemon got buffed so much that it had to be banned. And the reason Dragonite is so good in Gen 4 OU is because it's filling the space that Salamence left. Now Salamence is not allowed in Gen 4 OU, meaning Dragonite can take its place. In Gen 3 OU, Salamence is one of the top Pokemon of the metagame, a very diverse and reliable offensive Pokemon with Dragon Dance sets, mixed attacking sets, even defensive Wish support sets. A truly great Pokemon, but even though it was already good in Gen 3, it got buffed so much in Gen 4 that I feel it deserves a top 3 position here. If Dragonite benefited from the new options of Outrage and Draco Meteor, Salamence did 10 times over, with its superior stats, higher speed, and incredible Intimidate ability. Salamence was the king of all dragon types by a significant margin here. A simple choice banned Salamence clicking Outrage was near indestructible, but it didn't help that when you see a Salamence you don't know what the hell it's going to be because Salamence is so diverse. Its special attack is 110 and its hard-hitting Draco Meteor and other mixed attacking options mean that a physical wall is not going to be safe. Salamence is a Pokemon that is able to threaten pretty much every single thing in Gen 4 OU with near lethal force. The addition of the Yachi Berry meant that even Ice-type moves weren't 100% safe against Salamence. In Gen 3, Salamence was really good, but it was also balanced. Plenty of popular Pokemon could check it reasonably. It was not instantly winning the battle off a single Dragon Dance. It was not threatening the entire universe. There were things that could check it. There were things that could respond to it. Now, with these massive buffs, the new items of Gen 4, the physical special split, and new attacking options, Salamence kind of does threaten everything as soon as it hits the field, with extraordinarily limited counterplay. And this power spike, I think, makes it deserving of my top 2 position here as biggest winners of Gen 4. The greatest winner in the transition from Gen 3 to 4 was, in my opinion, undoubtedly Clefable. In Gen 3, Clefable was far worse than any of these other winners. It was incredibly far away from OU viability. It was ranked in the RU tier. Clefable is a bad Pokemon in Gen 3, directly inferior to Blissey and other utility normal types. It has the dreadful ability Cute Charm, which is almost as good as nothing. A chance of infatuating enemy on contact is rather useless. Its move pull is decent, but its stats are unimpressive. And it just doesn't do anything that other normal type utility Pokemon can't already do. But in Gen 4, Clefable absolutely skyrocketed. It actually took a while for people to realize how good Clefable was, but in the current day, in modern Gen 4 OU, Clefable is probably considered the number 4 Pokemon in the metagame by most people, right behind Jirachi, Tyranitar, and Latias. Clefable is right up there, and that is because Clefable was blessed with the new ability Magic Guard in Gen 4, which is one of the biggest buffs ever granted to a Pokemon. Magic Guard is one of the best abilities in the game, granting a complete immunity to all indirect damage. You are immune to everything that is not an attack, which is absolutely unbelievable. You're immune to poison damage, leech seed damage, sand damage, hazard damage, everything. This is such a big buff that Clefable's terrible stats are not that much of a downside anymore. The complete immunity to sand and hazards and most forms of anti-defensive Pokemon technology just makes up for all of Clefable's previous shortcomings. And now Clefable is like the Blissey of Gen 4 OU. What Blissey was to Gen 3, Clefable is for Gen 4. It's the go-to special wall of this format, and it has incredible options. Another new option it received in Gen 4 was Knock Off, another option that people took a while to realize how great this was. It's a 20 power dark type attack in Gen 4 that simply removes the enemy's item. This is such a great option because it's so safe and it always results in an advantage. It's pretty much a free click. You bring in Clefable and click Knockoff, you're always gonna just improve your chances of winning a little bit. You can't taunt to prevent knockoff since it's an attack, it's a utility attack. There's no immunities to knockoff besides the occasional sticky hold Pokemon, which aren't very good in Gen 4. And no Pokemon really wants to lose their item. Items are central to the game. They're a very important part of pushing your advantage, getting more out of your Pokemon. The knockoff is just an incredible new utility move for Clefable to get, and with Magic Guard enhancing Clefable's defensive prowess so significantly and giving it more opportunities to knock things off, Clefable is feeling extraordinarily powerful in this format, and it's got to be the most significant jump here from garbage utility Pokemon completely inferior to other options to now the best defensive utility Pokemon in the format by quite a significant margin. Now, outclassing Blissey. It might be confusing the fact that Clefable's ranked UU in Gen 4. This is an outdated ranking that is frozen in time back when Gen 4 was current. They don't update the tiers in Gen 4. So, if usage-based tiering was still effective, Clefable would absolutely be OU ranked. It is one of the strongest Pokemon in the format. Morally speaking, Clefable's a bit of an enigma. I can't quite pin this fella down, whether they're a beacon of positivity or a menace to society, a bringer of death and destruction. It's sometimes both things at once. Clefable's a complex Pokemon with nuance that's hard to really black or white label as good or bad. A very complex Pokemon indeed. I do think that in the Gen 4 metagame specifically, Clefable leans more towards immorality, but there's a whole career of Clefables to factor in, so I can't quite say either way, can I? Regardless though, that is my list of top 3 winners and top 3 losers in the Gen 4 transition, with some runner-ups thrown in for the fans. What did you think of my choices here? There are some big ones I didn't bring up, like Gyarados and Flygon and such. Many Pokemon benefited and suffered from the transition. I could scarcely name all of them. Were there any noteworthy ones that you think I left
out that I shouldn't have, and any other qualms with my choices, please let me know. Please tell me. And thank you very much for watching, as always.